There's an African author by the name of Chinua Achebe who wrote a book called The Anthills of the Savannah. And in that book, he explores multiple themes. But one of the biggest themes that's explored in that book is probably one of the best ways to maintain peace is through overwhelming force. And the reality is, when we were growing up dealing with bullies, you realized that a lot of the advice that you got from your parents, from your friends, is just to fight back, because the people who are least likely going to engage in violence are going to get bullied the most. It's not necessarily about winning the fight itself, but it is mostly about showing the people who are trying to take advantage that you're going to make it difficult each and every time that they try to do so. How does this end up kind of tying into a political state? Realistically, it's important to understand that our governments have somewhat more power to put things into motion without necessarily consulting us, because they've already been elected by us. So that power that they get to increase your taxes, for example, to add custom duties for your imports, your exports, just to overall make your life somewhat more difficult without you having a say about it, is something that is a reality, and we can't necessarily deny that it's a part of our lived experience. And as people, the more that we grow, we need to be open to the fact that we need to hold these people accountable, not through social media. Yes, I understand the hypocrisy because this video is on social media, but also unify as people and also take to the streets. When it's time to protest, we all need to unify and protest for things that are in our best interest. Things becoming more expensive is not in our best interest. It's in the best interest of the major businesses who can hike the prices up of the goods and services that you consume without necessarily considering you, no matter what the government policies become. It's in the best interest of the government themselves, because they get to skim more off the top over and above what they've already been skimming. But for us people on the ground, life becomes perpetually difficult. Look, there's always an argument that when you try and fight back against the government, things may not necessarily end well. And you can use case studies such as Zimbabwe, such as Mozambique, such as Sudan to make your case, especially Sudan, which ended up being at war. But the thing that Zimbabwe and Mozambique, for example, have in common is whenever they try to protest, whenever they try to fight against the state, firstly, it weaponizes the military and the police to rough up people. And they've realized that it's a structure and a strategy that works, because whenever they do that, people are most likely going to go back and not do it again. That's the path of least resistance for them. But the reason why they use these types of actions against people is because they recognize the amount of power that can happen when people stop going to work and spend their time protesting, the amount of power and influence that can have, people going on into the streets and advocating and showing the world that we will not take any more nonsense. That's something that we don't necessarily do. It's a scary reality, because on the other side, yes, a possibility of war is always on the table when we look at a country like Sudan. And war is not in the best interest of anyone. I can honestly be the first one to say. But the older that I get, I'm in a place in my life where I start to realize that if these material conditions don't change, if status quo remains the same, it's only going to get worse for you, for your children, for your grandchildren, if nobody does anything to change it. The thing that I'm trying to say now is, if they're willing to increase your tax by 30%, or by 2%, actually, by 2%, right, in 2025, in 2030, they'll be willing to increase it by another 2% without necessarily having increased how much money you earn, the opportunities in that country, or having done anything to assist the people's material conditions. The reality there is, sometimes it's better to take to the streets, even if there is a threat of overwhelming violence. Because personally, for me, I am getting to a stage where I believe it's better to at least die on my feet than to live on my knees. And I would hope that a lot of people start viewing it that way, because, like I said at the beginning, the person who's least likely going to engage in violence is going to get bullied the most. One of the best ways to maintain peace is through overwhelming force. And until we realize that, we'll always be taken advantage of by our leaders.